When engaging Muslims in religious discussion, one usually hears that Islam is a religion of peace and there is no compulsion in religion. This phrase, often quoted by Muslims when freedom of religion is discussed, is a convenient phrase, but not the final word in the Quran by any means. The phrase, no compulsion in religion, comes from Surah 2, 256, which gives the impression of complete freedom of choice for individuals within an Islamic state or community. Note that no compulsion in religion is even at first glance a negative form of freedom, meaning at its best that it tolerates but does not grant the right of freedom for an individual to choose his or her own religion. If no compulsion in religion were to be practiced, then the preaching of the gospel would not be criminalized in Islamic states. Yet people are regularly deported from Islamic countries for giving a Bible to a Muslim, for discussing Christianity with an individual, or in some cases even for possessing a Bible of their own. Even if one were to make a simple statement with no intention to offend, such as Muhammad the Prophet was not holy, or Islam is not the final religion, that would be regarded as blasphemous almost everywhere in the Islamic world. In Pakistan, for instance, one would be charged with blasphemy under Pakistan's Penal Code 295 A, B, and C, with a penalty varying from a minimum 10 years to life imprisonment or even a death sentence. If the no compulsion in religion of Surah 2, 256 were to be practiced, then why does the Saudi Penal Code describe a death penalty to any Muslim within Saudi Arabia were he to change his religion? Almost anywhere in the Islamic world, a public statement of a Muslim's conversion or discarding of Islam bears a heavy penalty of isolation, official persecution, imprisonment, and even death. As discussed elsewhere in this chapter, since conversion to a religion other than Islam is considered treason against an Islamic state, the execution is often done in public. According to Islamic jurisprudence and Sharia law, with the unanimous agreement of all scholars, no compulsion in religion simply means that all Arabs, Jews, Christians, non-believers, and pagans have the freedom to convert to Islam, but not the other way around. In other words, it is a one-way freedom. Now you have the topic of taqiyya, which is basically, the meaning is to cover up. But literally, it means caution, fear, or disguise. We'll move into, there's going to be 4 topics here within the Pragmatic Challenge. We're going to look at taqiyya, then abrogation, and then biblical corruption, and then the doctrine of living obedience. So taqiyya, it sanctions lying to or deceiving others to advance the cause of Islam or to preserve its good name. It permits the suspension, as the need arises, of almost any or all religious requirements or its doctrines, including a total denial of faith when fearing threat, injury, or compulsion of any kind in a non-Muslim society, or even a Muslim society. The wiles used in connection with taqiyya in taking oaths with a complete mental blockage by the user continue to do incalculable damage and injury to all of its victims. Taqiyya is very effectively used in apologetics, so a Muslim debater will hide or deny parts of the Quran to justify and advance the cause of Islam, always outmaneuvering his Christian opponents. The debater does this with no guilt, as this is divinely sanctioned. Now let's look at abrogation. The doctrine of abrogation was to Muhammad a doctrine of convenience, so when he claimed a revelation to be no longer suitable, he claimed that it was replaced by some new revelation. For example, initially in his mission in his mission, Christians were friends and called the nearest and closest to Muslims, but later they were the enemies and the worst of all his creatures. So this doctrine is scattered all over the Quran, and you've got, one verse nullifying another verse. Now let's look at the doctrine of biblical corruption. The doctrine of the corruption of the Bible is constantly preached in the mosques and Islamic outlets, deploying all mental and spiritual skills and in debates. In the initial stages of Muhammad's mission, the early surahs validated the biblical scriptures only to be abrogated by later ones. It is not unusual for Muslim speakers to impress their Western audiences with these earlier friendly verses and to proclaim that there is hardly any difference between Islam and Christianity. Islam declares that Allah has created man and jinn, which is unseen beings, to worship him. Islam, being a religion and a state, obligates a Muslim to such worship at both levels. These duties are known as ibadah. So fasting is worship, and salat and zakat, and so is no, I can't say that word correctly, but hijab and wearing of beards for men. But ibadah also includes killing and slaying all his enemies. From a pragmatic perspective, the doctrine of living obedience gives the Islamic authorities full rights to demand any services from the Muslims, including sacrifice of property and even life. In fact, this doctrine is the basis of the current suicide phenomenon observed now on a daily basis. I encourage everyone to look more at Islam, to study up on the doctrines, and to seek out truth above all. I credit the content of the slides to author Sam Solomon, taken from the chapter Challenges from Islam in the book Beyond Opinion, edited by Ravi Zacharias. Thank you for listening.